everyone, so I have just finished the address book by Deirdre Mask. Don't know if it's, oh yeah, there we go. So I literally just finished this book about 20 minutes ago, so I thought I would just quickly wrap this up while it is fresh in my mind. So this was a really compelling read actually. It's almost like a series of historical anecdotes. Now I don't know whether that's an official descriptor, but it kind of goes through all of the ways that addresses are fundamentally important to society, and it breaks it down into a few different topics: race, class, development, origins, politics, race, class and status. Now this is really interesting because this is something that I wouldn't think would be so important, but this book really sold me on the importance of addresses, street names, and it goes into a whole quirky and unique take on the topic of addresses. So it talks about how in Japan addresses are constructed in blocks, not linear lines, and that's because of how in Japan they learned the language through calligraphy and icons, and their language is in blocks, whereas English and other European languages, it's learnt in a linear way from left to right. And it talks a lot about American cities because Deirdre Mask is American, but she also talks about other cities like London, about Berlin, Paris, and kind of where we've got the concept of street addresses from. So for example, in America it's quite unique that they have numbered streets like 34th Street, and it talks about how in the UK there's a lot of repetitive street names like King and Queen in the title. And then it goes into some really interesting street names like Martin Luther King Street, Bobby Sands Street in Iran, and how that shaped the politics around the area, and how Martin Luther King Street in the US has kind of been synonymous with African American neighbourhoods. It talks about South Africa and apartheid in here, and how so many challenges to the system have been based on street names, and just some fascinating historical nuggets. How a famous physician in London in the Victorian era used maps to try and figure out what spread cholera, and it allowed him to realise it was coming from a well that everybody on that street had access to. That's where the cases were coming from. So there's some really fascinating and insightful nuggets of information, and she writes in such a compelling way that I raced through these chapters because they individually were as interesting as each other. I think the discussion on homelessness and the importance of having an address and to have access to government help, employment, healthcare, things like that is so important. And the first chapter talked about how Google Earth, and the very last chapter discussed what 3 words, which is technology that's been used to try and map the world, so that if people are in remote locations or there has been an accident, they can be easily accessed by the emergency services. I think the first chapter and the last are really interesting in that, about how Google Earth is also trying to give people in remote areas that don't have addresses so they can access healthcare and things like that. Really rich, interesting discussions and thought-provoking things came from this book. So I think I'm going to give it higher than The Dead Are Arising because I found each little chapter really engaging. I think it's the perfect length. I think any longer and it would have started to feel a bit tedious, but each chapter was fresh, really well edited, so that kind of just the most interesting nuggets came out of each chapter. It didn't feel like we repeated any ground with this book. Everything was new and fresh, and really changed my opinion on the importance of an address. So I'm going to give this 4 stars because I think the Malcolm X book was in the end just a little bit too long, so this to me was just perfect. And I also think this will appeal to so many people. I'm not really somebody, I have done a history degree, but I'm not fascinated by the history of items or things. Even the introduction to this book was quite interesting because she was arguing that, you know, there's been so many useful things in the world. She references the pencil or the toothpick as really interesting things that are humble but have a really important history of importance, of why they have helped humanity. She did a big kind of pitch in the introduction that she will prove to you the importance of address books, and I think this book did that really successfully. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed this. I'm going to give it 4 stars. So at the moment we have Our Bodies, Their Battlefield in last place, The Dead Are Arising next, and then in first place at the minute is The Address Book by Deirdre Mask. So I now just have these 3 left. I have Notes on a Silencing, The Dragons, the Giant, the Women, and Cast. I think I'm probably going to put Cast last. It's the 27th of June now, so I have till the end of July. I would love, ideally, to read this one next and maybe finish it this week, and then it means I kind of have 2 books for the majority of July to get through. But the last few weeks I've been really busy with uni and trying to get tasks and assignments done. So I would have really finished the address book even earlier. I had to keep putting it down because of life commitments. So I'm going to start with this one next and hopefully get through this one. I know that it's not that lengthy. Yeah, it seems about 200 odd pages, so I'm hoping that by the end of this week this one will be done, and then I can just read the other 2 in July. So I'm kind of crawling back to getting to a place of success with this booktube reading, but this has been the hardest so far because of the uni commitments and just how much uni work, how it's ramped up this module. I will check in with you guys when I've read this. Hello everyone, so just another quick check-in with you guys. I have finished The Dragons, the Giant, the Women by Way Too More, and it's now the 10th of July, so I have now got roughly 3 weeks to finish the other 2 books, and I also have a deadline for an assessment that's in at the same time, so I'm very, very stressed. But I've decided to give this 3.5 out of 5 stars. The writing in this memoir is absolutely stunning. It's beautiful. It reads like a fiction. She muses on her identity and her mother moving to America and then being able to escape Liberia and move to the US is really poignant. The way she talks about her identity and how she deals with trauma in this book is really interesting. It's just beautifully written, and it had this lyricism to it where it really felt like you were reading a fiction, but this is all roughly based on her own experience. I just think I wasn't in the right headspace to read this at the moment because I didn't ultimately have the time to give to this book. It's only 270 pages, and I could appreciate how lovely this book was in terms of how it was written, and it was pinging off a lot of things in my mind to think about, but I'm just really pressed for time at the minute. So I think ultimately my overall enjoyment experience was a little bit higher with The Dead Are Arising, so I'm going to put it at 3.5 like The Dead Are Arising, but below The Dead Are Arising. So it currently stands at Our Bodies, Their Battlefield in last place, then next is The Dragons, the Giant, the Women, then The Dead Are Arising, and then currently still on top is The Address Book. I think maybe in a different context I would have enjoyed this more, and I definitely think a lot of the things on the back about it being a classic is definitely true. I think this will be timeless, and it will really be a great way for a lot of people to get into memoirs because this reads in such a propulsive fiction type style of writing that I think this I would recommend to anyone to read. But yeah, I'll check in with you guys when I have actually started reading some of Notes on a Silencing by Lucy Crawford, because that's the next book I'm going to read. So I'm just doing a check-in with you guys. It is the 16th of July now, and I am exactly halfway through Notes on a Silencing by Lacey Crawford. So I haven't been reading much recently because I have a really big uni assessment in, and as it's getting nearer and nearer, I've realised that my deadline for the BookTube Prize coincides and clashes with this assessment. It's a 4,000 word report that I'm in the process of planning and really needing to write up because I've got about 3 weeks to do that in. So I am halfway through this book now, so I think I'll definitely be able to finish this. I'm really hoping that over the next couple of days I'm going to try and write some things out in raw form for the essay. Next couple of days, try and read this in my downtime, get this one ticked off. But I have a feeling that I might not be able to finish this by the deadline because it's roughly around 2 weeks, or just less than 2 weeks now, left of the BookTube Prize. So it's going to constitute a little bit of cheating, which I didn't do in the last rounds or last year, but what I'm going to try and do is read as much of this as possible and then make a judgment on what I've read of this so far and then rank them, because obviously they need to be ranked, and I just do not think I'm going to get time to complete both of these and write an assessment that I need to pass to carry on with my master's, so I do have to make priorities. So I feel very guilty about it, but I think that's the game plan going forward. I will finish this book, and as soon as the 5th and 6th of August is done, I will have a life again and I'll read this. And I have signed up to judge the final round because I won't have any assessments during that time, so I can commit to it. So this is the only stumbling block that I've encountered this year. But I just wanted to fill you guys in on how I'm finding this book so far. So this is a memoir of Lacey's experiences of being sexually assaulted and abused during her time at boarding school, and it was quite a prestigious boarding school. It references how a lot of people have come from very wealthy backgrounds, and status is very important there. And she's going through incidents in her life where she has been abused. So a family friend made a pass on her over the summer holidays in her youth, and then she was sexually assaulted at college. At this boarding house, these two young men forced her to perform oral sex on them. And this is so interesting because it's talking about how as a young person and then going into adulthood, she didn't ever understand that she was a rape victim because of the terminology that we use for people who have been assaulted, and how rape is explicitly seen as penetrative sex, how the kind of assault that happened to her she found difficult to talk about and to find the right terminology with. And also she talks about how the shame of a victim means that they don't seek help, and she's gone through how she finally had access to her medical records and how symptoms that she was experiencing, physical symptoms after the assault, how they were seen and documented, and how she kind of fell through the net during her time there, and how she didn't know how to tell her parents. And also when she told her parents about this older family friend, they decided all to just drop it because he was quite well known. So it talks about all the ways in which she was let down, and it talks about how society is set up to let women down, and particularly children, because she was a minor during all the time that these sexual incidents occurred. And the way she discusses her experiences and processing it all from the hindsight of a fully grown woman, processing the indignation, the frustration, the isolation of what happened to her, and being able to see in an adult context how she was let down, and have the maturity to reflect on this really traumatic period of her life and to bear it to us in such a raw form in this memoir, I think is absolutely incredible. And the way she writes about some of these things, her language is just stunning. Some passages in here that will stay with me. The way she's described how she was walking from the incident, and she's filtered this through really well, that lens of being a teenager, of all these expectations and all these strange thoughts that go through your mind of how to please people and how to understand men and boys at that age and attraction and what's going on and the complexities of all these other things going on, and her sense of duty to her family. It's just shocking what happened to her, but I find it just incredible the way that she can talk about it. I knew that this would be one that I would connect with in particular, because I know that Know My Name by Chanel Miller was just so powerful for me last year. So I do think I've still got half of this left to read, but I do think this will go in the top 3. And to be honest, I do have a strong inkling that Cast will also go in my top 3. But I've just started reading again, and I've just got really into this, so I'm hoping that maybe in the next day or 2 I can finish this off. And I'll just give you more of a concise wrap up, because I've already told you now a little bit about what I'm thinking about it, and then I can try and get through as much of Cast as possible. So I'll check in with you guys when I've finished Notes on a Silencing. Hello everyone, so just a quick check-in. I've just come in from the sun. It's a beautiful day outside, but I've just finished Notes on a Silencing, so I just wanted to quickly wrap this up. My opinion of this book didn't change. I think it was really poignant. I think she was so brave to talk about her experiences, and it was really interesting to see the impact of what had happened to her on future romantic relationships that she started, on her psychological sense of self, and how the school dealt with it poorly. Further on in the book, she kind of discloses to her family what had happened, and she does get some of the help that she needs to be treated, because unfortunately from the incidents she contracts an STD, and that finally gets acknowledged and dealt with. And then it kind of talks about how she recovers from that incident, how she moves forward with her life, how she processed that abuse, and the way that, in that horrible way that teenagers do, how it was dealt with by females in her peer group and men and boys and who she was interested in. And then how it all came to light that the school had had a very bad history with sexual abuse and sexual assault, not just with the students, but with the teachers against students. Abuse happened, inappropriate relationships, sexual exploitation. So it was really interesting, and she's just so brave to write this book, and it really was eye-opening for me. I know this has got criticism because it kind of is in a very white privilege lens. I know that a lot of the families that went to the school had wealthy backgrounds, and a lot of people find that that's a little bit provocative with this book, but abuse is abuse, whether you're a white middle-class woman or a white wealthy woman. Sexual abuse is still sexual abuse, and she was a minor, she was a child when these incidents happened, and it's horrific what happened to her, and I'm glad she's talking about it, and I'm glad she's breaking the stigma, particularly because in the upper echelons of society it must be even harder to break the silence, because there's a level of expectation and you should be happy and lucky in your financial position. So I applaud this book. I think I'm going to give this 4.5 stars, because I just found her writing was really beautiful as well. Descriptions of her vulnerability and shame, and she merges religion in here because both of her parents were very religious, so it's got a lot of really interesting things to unpick. So I'm going to give this 4.5, so this will go above the address book, and then I'm going to read Cast. So at the moment it goes, number 1 is Notes on a Silencing, number 2 is the address book, number 3 is The Dead Are Arising, number 4 is The Women, the Giant, the Dragons. I always forget what that's called. And number 5 is Our Bodies, Their Battlefield. And then I've just got Cast to read. So I'll try and read as much of that as possible, and then do as much of a wrap up as I can of Cast, and then rank them. But I predict that Cast will be in the top 3, so I think Notes on a Silencing, the address book, and Cast is probably what I'll vote for, but I will read it and let you guys know, so I'll catch up with you then. Hello everyone, so this is going to be my final check-in for the BookTube Prize semi-finals. Time has completely got away with me. I have a week left to do an assessment, just over a week. a week and a few days to get my master's assignment done. I have so much to do, so I'm now going to do a daily planner for the week of things I need to get done. But I also got an email from Robert 2 days ago reminding me that I had to put my ballot in for this. So I have been quite honest with you guys in the last few clips about where I'm at. I am reading Cast. I am loving Cast. Disappointingly though, I am only 50 pages into Cast. It is around 400 pages, so obviously nowhere near, but I just cannot commit to this. I've been really, really stressed with my assessment and really worried about passing it. There's just been so much. It's a 4,000 word report, but there is quantitative data, qualitative data, a literature review. There is so much involved in it, and I'm just completely out of my depth. So I just have not been able to read this, unfortunately. What I can say is I'm absolutely loving this. Isabel Wilkerson has a beautiful writing style. I love how she uses analogies of other things to comment on this caste system. She makes a description at the beginning about the melting permafrost and references to decrepit old houses as kind of descriptors for the American caste system, and her argument is really strong so far, even though it's only 50 pages in. This exploration of the caste system in India and the comparisons to that and the American caste system, she's making a really clear argument, and I'm finding that really, really captivating. But obviously I have not had a chance to get any further into this. I know there's another caste system that I think she describes in this book, the Nazi Germany caste system. So those are the 3 things that she's going to discuss. But so far I'm really enjoying the exploration of this, and I can already tell in 50 pages in that it's just of a higher calibre than some of the other books on this list. So I've had to make a decision, and what I've ultimately decided to do is to rank it where I'm feeling about it now. I'm quite confident though that this would be in the top 3 anyway, so it's the nearest to coming to a fully rounded conclusion that I can get to, and I apologise that I have not been able to finish this book. I hate letting people down, but this assessment is really, really important for my future, and I've had to invest a lot of energy into it, a lot more than the very first module. So it is definitely something to bear in mind next year about my level of commitment to these projects. But I have no assessments in August or September, so I can enjoy reading the final books. And I cannot wait till I can put this assessment in so that I can read again, because I'm really enjoying this book and I want to get back into reading. But anyway, what we're going to do then is we're going to let you have the final rankings. I've put Cast as number 1 because I'm just loving it so much. I know that BookTube and the book community have really rated this book, so I'd be surprised if it doesn't make it to the final. But who knows? So Cast is number 1. I have put Notes on a Silencing as number 2. I've put The Address Book by Deirdre Mask as number 3. The Dead Are Arising as number 4. Number 5, The Dragons, the Giants, the Women by Way Too More. And in last place, I have put Christina Lamb's Our Bodies, Their Battlefield. So that is it. They are my rankings. That's what I've scored. I'm really excited to see what books make it to the final, and I hope that you've all enjoyed this period of reading and ranking the semi-finals. So I'll see you guys very soon. Bye.